Hello, this is Shaneka, and welcome to Marriage Masterclass. This is part one of our conscious communication series. Let me set some ground rules. You cannot change your spouse, you can only change yourself. So, if you're participating in this so that you can change your spouse and teach your spouse and convince your spouse this is what he or she needs to do, stop it. You can't do that. You cannot change him or her, but you can be a positive influence. Change has to begin within us first in order for us to see a shift in the dynamics within the relationship. So, we are doing self-work and not spouse work. That means we're pointing the finger at ourselves, and we're going to do more inner work with ourselves so that we can learn and grow instead of us pointing the fingers and telling our spouse what he or she needs to do. So that's the groundwork. Those are the ground rules for marriage masterclass. So if you're watching this by yourself, you're doing the work. But if you're watching this together, that means you're going to do it together and you're going to grow together, right? Right. So let's get started. You should already have your marriage masterclass worksheet. And if you do not have your marriage masterclass worksheet, just drop me an email, or you should check your email, make sure it's not just sitting there in your spam box. But we're going to get started with the first point: conscious communication. Why did I call this conscious communication? Because consciousness is so important when we're communicating. One, because we have to be totally aware and cognizant of what we are thinking and how we say it, okay? So consciousness is first, you have to be totally aware, totally cognizant of what you're thinking and what you're saying, all right? And then you have to be totally present and connected in the present moment. Totally connected in the moment. That means you're being mindful, all right? So we're being responsible, accountable, and in control of our thoughts, right? We're not just going to snap off and pop off at our spouse anymore. We're going to really be intentional about what we're thinking and really be aware of that in the present moment. So this is going to require you to practice and have some self-control and some discipline, all right? It's not going to be easy. And then thirdly, not only will you be completely in control, but you'll also be being accountable for what you say and how you say it, all right? And so this is going to decrease emotional episodes where you're just exploding, and it's going to help decrease some conflicts in the marriage. So this is the reason why I am focusing on conscious communication. I could have gone any direction with communication, but I want us to be conscious and aware. So that is why consciousness is so important in our marriage when we're communicating, because we're going to be aware, really intentional, and in control of our thoughts, what we're thinking in the present moment. All right, so now I want to move into part two, the second question, rather not part two, but the second question of our conscious communication worksheet. And the question is, how does character affect communication? Well, character affects our communication because our character shows other people who we are, right? And character describes our heart. So pretty much that sums it up. How we communicate, it really comes from the heart. And so I have my note cards here, and I have written here, it says, you can learn communication skills. You can learn the best communication skills, right? But your character will challenge the effectiveness of those skills. So it doesn't matter how well you communicate. Your character will determine or will challenge the effectiveness of those communication skills. So what do I mean by that? Say for instance, you have a conversation with your spouse and you become angry, right? You get upset, you're really, really angry, and you start to make nasty comments. For you feel like that is just just kind of came out of nowhere sometimes, like, oh, I really didn't mean to say that. I shouldn't have said that. And you can't take it back, because once you say it, you can't take it back, right? When we communicate, we can apologize for it. We can try to make amends for it, but we cannot retract the words per se, because they've already been released into the atmosphere. But if you are so upset and you begin to make nasty remarks towards your spouse, where does that come from? Does it just come here, or really does it come from where it's been sitting at the seat of our heart? It's been just kind of sitting there for a while, or 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 is it just something that you just know, you just like, well, I really didn't mean it. Well, yeah, you did really mean it. So we have to be accountable for what we say. And just let me say this: your 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 emotions, they are real and they are relevant. So I'm not going to take that away from you. Your emotions are real and they are relevant. Your feelings are real and your feelings are relevant. But how you communicate, how you express your feelings and your emotions, it has to be conscious. All right? And so your emotion requires consciousness, awareness, and discipline. So expressing your emotions is going to require you to be aware, which is conscious, and it's going to require you to be disciplined. And I know some of you are like, what? Like, my spouse talk to me any kind of way, and they don't listen to me, and they cut me off, and they're rude and disrespectful. That's right, but we're not pointing the finger at our spouse. We're doing our own work and saying, you know what? But let me just do a self-inventory and just let me double check to make sure that I am aware of, one, my true character. All right? So what kind of character do you have? Because sometimes we may say, I'm a really good person, but our character shows our spouse and other people who we are, because we can be really good people. We can be good people, but we can also be grumblers, complainers. We can also be negative people. We can also be jealous, resentful. We can be irresponsible. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. So if I had your spouse to write a character list of all the good and the negative characteristics, the character within you, what would he or she write? So first we have to look and face the truth. We got to face the truth about ourselves first, so that we can change and that we can actually, like I said, we're going to shift. There's going to be a shift within the dynamics of our relationship. So if the conflict is like, if the communication is like this right here, as we change and as we improve, consciously communicating and also focusing on our character, we're going to see a change in the relationship as well. Okay? So that is why character is so important, because what you think, you will oftentimes respond to. And some people respond just like that. But we're going to be cautious. We're going to be mindful in the present moment, because what you say, you can't take it back. We're going to handle our spouse's spirit as gently as possible. I'm not going to say anything that is going to attack and tear them down. And I know I'm going back to something I've said before, but we're going to do something to build them up. So that is why character is important. Okay, so we're talking about character, and character is basically the way someone thinks, feels, and behaves, right? So, like the Bible says, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. So as you thinketh in your heart, remember when I was talking about earlier, like character is a reflection of our hearts. So that is so important. We have to really reflect on who we are and what we're showing our spouse. What are we showing our spouses? Are we showing them that we are gentle, that we are patient, that we are kind, and that we are selfless? You got to do that character list. So go to your worksheet and make sure you identify that, all right? So I'm not going to hold you too long on that piece. But I want to move on to question 4. What are our communication hot buttons? So I want you to identify what those hot buttons are, those triggers that your spouse can just push that button and boom, you off. You set. You just set it off. We have them. We all have them. We have little things that behaviorally what our spouses are doing that just sets us off. So let me give you an example because this is the replay of the master class. One of the wives shared in class. She gave an example that she and her husband and the kids were driving. They were in the car and they were riding. And her husband, she said, I could sense that he was, that he really wanted paper because he was looking around. She was like, he was looking through the console there. He was looking on the side of the seat, feeling. And she said he turned to her and he said, do you have paper? And she said, no, I don't have any paper. And so he looks at the kids and said, do you all have any paper? And the kids were like, no, we don't have paper. And so the husband was like, nobody has paper? Like, what do you mean? Nobody has paper. Everybody in this car, and nobody has paper. And so the wife said that she responded, like, well, don't get mad at me. Don't get mad at us because we don't have paper. And her husband responded, you can't stop telling me what to do. Don't tell me what to do. All right. We know where that conversation went, right? This was my feedback to her. Let's step back. One thing I want you all to remember, all right, is that you have to listen very closely for the feeling. This is conscious. You're listening, okay? Conscious communication. You have to listen very closely for the feeling. So as she was describing the situation, the incident, as she was telling me all about it, I was listening very closely, not to what she was saying, the content, because we always listen to the content, and content is important, but guess what? Feelings are even more important. And I asked her, I said to her, how do you think your husband was feeling? What do you think he was feeling? And she said, I don't know what he was feeling. And I said to her, you described him. You said, I could tell that he really wanted the paper, that he was looking for something, that he was just kind of fidgeting. It was like really intense. I said to her, it sounds like your husband might have been feeling anxious. He was really anxious for paper because whatever it was he wanted to write down, he really wanted to get that down from here onto paper. That was so important, but he was anxious about it because he couldn't find paper. So out of his anxiety, he turns to his wife and, do you have paper? She says no. He turns to the kids, do you have paper? No, he's driving now, and so he really needs paper in order to write down whatever it is and it had to be important for him because he needed to write it down, right? I said to her, it sounds like your husband was feeling very anxious. And in his anxiety, he was asking for help. He was asking for some resources, which was the paper, and no one had that for him. So therefore, that caused the problem for him because he couldn't do what he needed to do. And the response that he received didn't help him. So because he didn't get any help, because he couldn't find the paper, and because he was feeling anxious, and that response that the wife gave, don't be mad at us, we don't have paper, he became upset. And he responded saying, don't tell me what to do. But the wife saw the anger, but the initial feeling was anxiety. So I said to her, now that you know that he was feeling anxiety, if someone is very anxious, because we all respond differently when we're feeling, certain ways. Everyone doesn't respond or express their anxiety the same. I said, now knowing that he was feeling anxious, right? He had this anxiety, looking for paper. What should you have said? How would you respond to someone who's anxious? And she said to me, I would have, if I had known that, I would have probably said, tell me what it is, and I'll type it in my phone. Or here, record it, say it out loud, and I record it. You begin to start helping the person find a resolution, right? If someone is anxious, you want to help them solve the problem. So it's not just, no, I don't have paper. You begin to find another way. Even if it's, I have pen, I'll write it on my hand. Or I have pen, and let's write it on this receipt. I have a Target or Walmart receipt. You find a way. And so had that happened, it wouldn't have been the explosion at that argument that they had. So I want you to listen closely to the feeling. and respond to the feeling. Okay? The content is important, but it's not that important, because a lot of times we respond to the content, what the person is telling us, and we miss responding to the feeling, because when you respond to the feeling, let me tell you what's going to happen, husbands and wives. You're going to have an instant connection. Instantly, you're going to connect, and that's that emotional intimacy that you want. All right? Because your spouse is going to feel like you get me, you understand me. We're here, right? We're here. And that is what I want you to do. Practice listening to the feeling and responding to the feeling. All right? Because the thing is, another example is, I was feeling so overwhelmed a while back, and that comes across. I get stressed out, and I snap. I get irritated easily. I mean, like, just truly, I'm snapping, and I'm putting the pressure on everybody in the house, my husband, my kids. And my husband took that as, you're just complaining a lot. You're complaining. All right? For him, that's what he was interpreting. And I had to step back and I had to say, hey, whoa, you have this all wrong, bro. You got this wrong. I'm overwhelmed. I feel overwhelmed. So I had to tell him, I'm the therapist, right? So I had to tell him. So even he has to practice listening for the feeling, because oftentimes we don't just say how we're feeling, but I had to come out and say, what you're seeing, it may feel, for you, it may look like I'm complaining, but really I am so overwhelmed. I am stressed. And so hence, I have a short fuse. But that in that moment, it was so beautiful, because with that conscious communication, with us really talking about it, now he knows what it looks like. But most importantly, we were able to sit down and discuss, like, how to take some of this pressure off. What can he do? How to relieve that stress for me, or help me relieve the stress. So it really turned into a really beautiful thing. So I want you to really focus on listening for the feeling. And if you don't know, if you get it wrong, just say, hey, I sense that you're feeling such and such. And if you're wrong, just say, I may be wrong, but this is what I'm sensing that you're feeling, And guess what? When you get it right, instant connection. All right. So just listen for the feeling. Another thing is, I want you to begin to use I statements. Because I keeps it pointing here at you and not at your spouse. Because when we do you always this and you that, that's blaming, right? We're pointing the finger. And who wants someone to point the finger at them and tell them everything that's wrong about them? I don't want to be married to married to a husband who's always pointing the finger and telling me what I'm doing wrong and how I am this, that, and the other. So pointing the finger back at yourself, I heard you say X, Y, and Z. Or I think I heard you say, even if you don't know, if you didn't get it right. Or I want us to be able to sit down and talk about these things. I want you to be honest with me. I feel upset when you tell me you're going to do something and you don't follow through with it. I feel like I can't depend on you when you don't follow through. I feel those are my feelings, right? Now, listen, will your spouse be defensive? Maybe so, because people aren't walking around communicating like this. So the natural initial feeling that other people may have is to be defensive. That's okay. But I want you to focus on the I statements. I want, I feel, I see, I expect. I expect for you to show up for me. I expect for you to open up to me. These are my expectations, and there's nothing wrong with you setting expectations. So those are two tips, those two communication tips. I want you to be so aware, all right? So conscious, so intentional. Listen to the feeling. Respond to the feeling before you respond to the content, and make sure you're using those I statements, okay? So let's wrap this up. We're going to wrap it up. Conscious communication. Aware, intentional, accountable. You're going to be cognizant of what you're saying, because consciousness, aware of what you're thinking, you're feeling, and how you behave, how you respond, all right? We want to have the right posture when we present ourselves to our spouse. when we're communicating to our spouses, right? Now, also, I want you to think about your those character defects that you have that needs to be tweaked or needs to be just eliminated. I want you to be honest with yourself and do that list. Take your worksheet out, slip it on the back, write your list out. And also, what are your communication hot buttons? What are those hot buttons that set you off? I want you to identify that. And if you don't know what it is, ask your spouse, because a lot of time our spouses know what our hot buttons are. And sometimes they can push them on purpose, and sometimes they don't push them on purpose. It's not even intentional, okay? So I want you to do that as well. And I want you to make sure that you listen for the feeling, okay? And respond to the feeling before responding to the content. And lastly, don't forget your I statements. Practice that. So do that for this week. And then next week, we're going to start with part 2 of our conscious communication, okay? Thank you for joining. Thank you for connecting. And thank you for being a part of this. And what I want you to do is, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to drop me an email. And I will definitely get back with you, because I want to make sure that you become a better communication, become more aware. All right? See you next week.